Imagine for a moment what a nightmare you are for the Japanese. Spend any time in this glorious country with its amazing sense of organisation and its deep, deep courtesy, and you realise that coming to our side of the world must be just awful for them. We wear our shoes in the house, which is filthy. We don't heat our toilet seats, which is just lazy. Honestly, we must seem like barely shaven cavemen to them. And then there's the fact that we ask them to make us giant SUVs. We have to have them. Things like the Mazda CX-60, which frankly just would not work in Japan. Personally, I feel deeply sorry for Akira Tamatani. He's the chief designer of this car, and when you ask him what the job was like of making the CX-60, he becomes quite emotional. I'm surprised he's got any hair left. He talks about how tall it was, how massive it is, the thickness of the car, and how all of that makes his job very difficult, like coming up with a face that is Mazda, normally thinner and a bit sharper, but has to be grand and large and on a vast scale never before attempted by a Japanese man.
Now look, it could be just me, but I see a lot of large BMW SUV in the CX-60. And I mean that in a nice way. It's not a direct copy or a lift, but it's definitely an influence, and nowhere is that more clear than the rear light cluster. Tamatani-san says the rear lights are meant to represent the pupil of an eye, but to me they look like they were designed by an eye attached to a human who was a big fan of BMWs, and perhaps the Jaguar F-Type as well. Again, this is not a huge criticism, it's just a representative of the fact that Mazda is clearly attempting to take on the Germans with this car. So looking a bit like them isn't a bad place to start.
I do think Tamatani-san has done a great job though. He's used the Japanese idea of taking things out rather than shoving them in. A minimalist aesthetic that Lexus does not understand with all its creases and lines. This is just pure, lovely architectural. And you can see, particularly if it's parked next to a CX-5, how the cabin is more rearward. Everything is focusing on the rear wheels to give that impression that this is a rear drive car, which makes it quite special.
When it comes to pricing, the CX-60 is setting new, dizzy heights in what Mazda thinks it can get away with charging for one of its vehicles. The plug-in hybrid version, which I was lucky enough to drive at the car's global launch in Portugal last year, will set you back more than 87 grand if you go for the one with all the fruit. And that is a lot, particularly for a Mazda. Throw in a few more options and some taxes and you're looking at north of $95,000. The CX-60 range does start somewhat lower, however, at $59,800 for the entry-level 6-cylinder petrol. The version I'm here in Japan to drive, however, is the diesel, which has a starting price just $2,000 above the entry petrol, but rises to $75,000 if you opt for the top-spec Azami model. There are various interior packages to choose from, ranging from the subtle, think black plastic with some more black plastic and maybe some grey plastic, to the black and tan version with its furry dash that we were given to drive. One cool selling point is the new driver personalization system, which is a mighty fine idea, because far too many people don't seem to know how to set up their own driving position. This Mazda does it for you. The very first time you drive your CX-60, it measures your eye line with a camera and then asks you to input your height so it knows how long your legs are. And then it adjusts the seat height, how far you are from the wheel, the mirrors, the steering wheel position and the height of the head-up display all at once. This information is then stored, and every time you get in the car it will use face recognition tech, just like your iPhone does, to work out who's driving and to restore your settings. It also stores 250 personalization values, everything from your preferred aircon temperature to your favorite radio station. Yes, 250. I know. I tried though, it works, and I was quite impressed. The CX-60 is a properly big old bus, so big that there's no way it would fit into a Japanese garage. It barely fits on a Japanese street. So it's not surprising to hear that hopes are not high for huge local sales in its country of origin. The driver gets plenty of head and shoulder room, it's a long way to reach over to the passenger door in fact, and it's genuinely quite comfortable in the rear as well, with significantly more legroom than a CX-5. The boot also feels large with a 570 litre capacity, increasing to 1,148 litres with the rear seats folded flat. The plug-in hybrid version is the range topper for the CX-60, and the 3.3 litre inline 6-cylinder petrol version is the one I'm most excited about driving. But Mazda seems to be saving the best until last, because our second crack at the car featured a 3.3 litre inline 6-cylinder diesel engine with its 48-volt mild hybrid system. If that sounds like a large engine, it is, but Mazda, counterintuitively, claims that making it so big allows it to produce more torque. It makes 550 newtons in fact, alongside 187 kilowatts, and that this means it's more economical and more environmentally friendly than a smaller diesel engine. The diesel CX-60 certainly delivers plenty of torque, making overtaking a thrusty, grunting breeze, despite the car weighing almost 2 tons. At cruising speeds, it's also pleasantly quiet, smooth and refined. But at low throttle openings or when the start-stop system kicks in at traffic lights, there's no disguising the fact that you're driving a diesel. Mazda reckons its 48-volt mild hybrid system, in combination with a new and noticeably smooth double-clutch 8-speed automatic, offers excellent fuel economy, while delivering a driving experience so pleasant and comfortable that drivers won't notice there are two power sources. And they're right, I've never noticed a mild hybrid kicking in ever. They also claim that the 3.3-litre 6-cylinder diesel used in the CX-60 is more economical than the 1.8-litre diesel that was previously offered in the CX-3, despite the bigger car obviously being far heavier and more powerful. The CX-60 has a claimed fuel economy of 4.9 litres per 100 kilometres on the combined cycle, and CO2 emissions of 128 grams per kilometre. Mazda also says its new engine design reduces nitrous oxide emissions, the really nasty diesel ones, in the high torque range. Sounds good. Unfortunately, the very strange driving we did in Japan, sitting on freeways that have 60 km/h limits, made it impossible to properly test the fuel economy claims in a real-world kind of situation.
Now, I love Japan, so much that I would live here, but I like the food too much and I would soon look like a sumo. But it turns out it's not the greatest place to drive. Every time I've ever been here before, we've been on a racetrack. This time I've been on freeways where the speed limit was 60 km/h. At one stage we got to 80, that was exciting, but it hasn't been the most thrilling of experiences in terms of the drive. Fortunately, I drove the CX-60 before at the international launch in Portugal, and I can report, having driven it on some very windy roads there, that it does handle brilliantly. Now, the original car we drove was the plug-in hybrid EV version, which was very powerful. That's the range-topping member of the CX-60 family, and it's very exciting. But we're here to drive the new diesel engine, and it's got plenty of torque. There's that kind of wait before it explodes away, but then you get that kind of torquey acceleration you expect from a diesel. In terms of noise, I'm very impressed with the way that the auto stop-start works. Normally in a diesel, when that kicks in and out of the lights, you get a rattle, the whole car kind of shakes itself like a dog shaking off water, and you're very aware of the start-stop function. But in this, it's very smooth. You can hear it's a diesel, and you can also hear it's a diesel at low throttle inputs, but most of the time it's quite quiet, and it makes a kind of pleasant growl rather than the old agricultural tractor rattle you expect from some diesels. So it's quite impressive. Now, because I love you and I take my craft very seriously, I just did a tour of the factory in Japan where this car is made, and they told us about the various processes they've changed to make the CX-60 feel more impressive and solid and premium than any other Mazda. And that's things like making the panel gaps smaller, from 4mm down to 3mm, the kind of thing you definitely notice with the naked eye. But the sense of solidity that you get when you shut the doors, the feel of the car on the road, it feels solid on the road. It obviously helps that it's actually heavy, but it does feel solid on the road and has a kind of Germanic build quality to it, which is very much what they're going for. Add in the fact that it looks fantastic, and it's quite an appealing proposition. In terms of the steering, it really does change when you go from normal to sport setting. You can feel more weight in it instantly, but there's a kind of slight artificial digitalness that's probably just partly psychosomatic, because you think, oh, is that real, or have I just changed to some kind of PlayStation setting? But overall it's nice, it's got a nice weighting to it, the typical kind of Mazda, slightly sporty feedback that you like in a car. I'd rate it highly, and from having driven the car previously in a sporty manner, it was very good. Now, why have Mazda launched the car with a diesel engine in a world in which diesel engines are going out of fashion faster than Elton John? I'm not sure. It's a question we're all asking. I don't imagine that it'll be the peak seller in the range. I mean, the PHEV was very exciting to drive. I'm most excited about the inline-6 petrol version, which I think will sound fantastic as well as be exciting. But the diesel, I guess it's for people who really care about fuel economy, or they like the smell of diesel, or they grew up on a tractor. I'm not sure, but it's an interesting choice. The thing is, with modern diesels, they're not awful. They're not that kind of unpleasant experience where you're bothered by the noise every time you start and every time you take off from the lights. It can be very smooth. Some of the modern German diesels, you literally have to put the window down to know you're in a diesel. So the Mazda's not quite that refined, but it's extremely refined compared to, if you're thinking of a diesel SUV of old, it's come a long way from there. It's not bad, and as I say, the torque response is always very good, and you will get good fuel economy.
The CX-60 received a maximum 5-star rating in the Euro NCAP crash testing. It gets a suite of iActive Sense driver-supporting technologies, including turn-across traffic assist, SBSR, pedestrian detection, emergency lane keeping, eye-adaptive cruise control, and BSM vehicle exit warning. It also comes with a new trick called see-through view, described as next-generation 360-degree view monitor. Basically, the front and rear of the car becomes slightly opaque on the screen, so you can see through it, which makes parking moves easier. Like other Mazdas, the CX-60 comes with a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty.
Now honestly, making an SUV look good is like designing a ball gown for a horse to go to the Oscars. But they've done a great job with this, particularly from the rear. So there you have it, the Mazda CX-60 diesel. Please read my review online at carsguide.com. It's fantastic and will make your day.